Hey everyone, this is David Gomez with the Latino Business Speaker Bureau, bringing you a speaker highlight for the Hispanic Heritage Month series, 31 by 31. Today, I am pleased to introduce to you Ivan Zapien. And Ivan, how are you doing?
I'm doing terrific. Thanks for having me, David.
Thank you so much for joining us. And Ivan, you have a very interesting background, and I believe that it would be very beneficial for our members to truly get to know you. So if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about your background and what you've worked on over the through the length of your career?
Yeah, so I'll start very briefly. Just let me just give you a little bit of my personal history because it helps educate a little bit about what I've done with my life professionally. So I was born in Mexico, in Guadalajara. Soy Tapatio. Some people however, I don't root for the Chivas. I root for the America. So my father doesn't speak to me during Mexican football season, which is always an interesting period. But I was born in Mexico, but I spent my entire life going back and forth. My mom was German, actually, but she grew up in the Washington D.C. area. My dad was Mexican, and so they married. And as a result, I would spend my summers in Washington D.C. and I would go back to Mexico. And then I moved to Tucson, Arizona, and went to high school and college in Tucson, Arizona. And then I moved from there to Washington, D.C. So in Washington, D.C., my career has been, diverse, and it's been challenging, and, I've done a lot of different things. So when I first came to Washington, D.C., I started my career working for Senator Dennis Deacon-Sini from Arizona. So I started working on Capitol Hill. Then after that, I went to go work at a law firm. And at the law firm, I started a graduate school program at GW, Graduate School of Political Management. Did that during the evenings and work in the law firm. And at the law firm, I mainly focused on a representation of clients in Puerto Rico. So, I spent probably 5-6 years of my life doing government relations, lobbying work, but also very involved in Puerto Rico politics. Finished my graduate degree as a night student and was at a law firm. So, said, well, it looks like, everybody around me is a lawyer. So I went to law school as a night student as well. So I finished my law degree. And then when I finished my law degree, I did what most sane people would do, right? And I say that facetiously because as soon as I got my law degree, I just decided, I was like, you know what? Working at a law firm is just not for me right now. So then I went to go work for the Democratic National Committee. So I spent a couple years at the Democratic National Committee. Then I went to go work for Bob Menendez when he was in the House of Representatives. I opened his Senate office. I was his last chief of staff in the House, first chief of staff in the Senate. I then helped to run his reelection campaign in 2006. And once he got reelected once again, as opposed to sitting there and continuing a glorious life as a Senate chief of staff, I decided, well, I want to do something different. So then I joined Walmart, where I was there for 10 years. I was 7 years head of the Washington, D.C. office and government relations operation. And then I moved to Mexico. I moved to Mexico City, where I headed up corporate affairs for Walmart, which was a fascinating experience. Got to take my family to Mexico and live in Mexico, fell in love with Mexico City. And once again, did kind of an odd thing, which is when I was in Mexico, I thought to myself, I really want a career, right, that involves Mexico City and Washington, D.C. And, so I went back to law, to my law degree and said, we'll go work for a law firm. So now I am a partner at Hogan Lovells, and I head up the government relations practice group. And I spent a lot of time in Mexico City, and I spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. But that, in a nutshell, is me.
Yeah. Wow. That's in a nutshell. It's a lot packed in there. So that's amazing. Um, would you mind telling us a little more about your work with Senator Menendez? Because I'm pretty sure that that's something that is an experience that you know, very few people get to say, you know, that they work with a senator.
Yeah. So, so it's it was both the most challenging job that I've ever had, bar none, and also the most rewarding.
Okay.
So when I went to go work, when I went to go work for Congressman Menendez, it was clear to me that he was going places, that he had just been elected to Democratic Caucus Chairman, which is the third ranking member in the leadership lineage, and it was historic. He was the first Latino, the first person of color that had gotten that job, and was the highest ranking member of Congress in congressional history, in the country's history. So I was sort of drawn to him just because he was a trailblazer and he was a Latino, and so I felt compelled, to try and figure out if I could work for him. And then once I got the job, I also felt like I was, just doing a historic thing, and I was really committed to him. And when it became evident that he was going to become a United States senator, we sort of had a meeting, because I didn't start off as his chief of staff. I was sort of his political person in Washington D.C. But when it became evident that he was going to, run for Senate, it wasn't evident yet that he would get appointed, but we knew we were going to the Senate. We sort of had a meeting and, decided that, that we needed a chief of staff to sort of run an operation with that goal. And when he offered it to me, I was sort of, like many times in my career, I thought to myself, well, I'm not fully qualified for that, but because I've never, been a chief of staff, and I certainly have never, been a chief of staff to somebody that is trying to run for, a statewide operation. But I told myself that I could probably figure it out. And I started, I started as his chief of staff in his last year in the House of Representatives, or last 16 months. And it was a grind, right? So, I was essentially doing, sort of three jobs, right? I was still his chief of staff, so we had an official function, so we had to do all the stuff that you do on the Hill. And then secondly, I was putting together a political operation, for him to run statewide. And then the third part, which is probably the most rewarding and at the same time the most challenging, is, you're a personal counselor to them, right? So, all of the conversations, you're always, I was always the last person in the room, right? And when you're the last person in the room, you have two options, right? You can say, oh, Congressman, that was great. I liked what you did there. Or sometimes you have to say, hey, I think we might need to take a different approach, which is not, it's not an easy function to have. It's, a lot of people love the idea of being the last person in the room, but it's sometimes a challenging situation, and we had a lot of challenges ahead of us. So once we started, plotting, his campaign, and there was a lot of people involved at this point, right? So I was one of probably half a dozen people that were guiding his campaign. Once we got into that, so that period of time, the challenge was even bigger, right? Because we had to assemble a team, but assemble a team really that did, it'd be good if everybody got along, but we chose to, and this speaks volumes of him, we chose to put together a team of people that didn't necessarily see eye to eye on everything.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of tension a lot of the time, but really what we were looking for is we were looking for different perspectives. So, managing a group of people who by design are always, at odds with each other in terms of what you need to do is a huge challenge. So I spent a lot of my time, trying to figure out how to thread, common needles. But, when Sen Menendez ran for re-election in 06, because, he got appointed, I failed to say that, he got appointed to fill John Corzon's seat,
Mhm.
for a year.
Right.
Right. So when he got appointed to that job, to fill the seat, then he had to run for re-election in 06, which meant that he had to turn it around in a state where it's really hard to get to be known because it's really expensive to do advertising in Philadelphia and New York.
Yeah.
Right, because those are the media markets. But he was also the first person of color to ever run statewide in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And so we always knew it was going to be a challenge, but it was a huge challenge. It was grinding. It was exhausting, and every single day. But it was so rewarding just to think, and I still have this. I still have in my office a Excel sheet that he signed that shows the vote totals of every single county in New Jersey. And the night when we won, I remember thinking to myself, next time something comes up in your career where you think, man, I'm not sure I can do that, or I'm not sure I'm qualified, come back to this spot, because I started off dubious about my ability to do what he was asking me to do. And then when I got it done, it was so rewarding for so many reasons. But the biggest one is that I proved to myself that I could actually do a lot of things, that I didn't think I could do as long as I put my mind to it.
Yeah, that's very commendable, and kudos on working with people that don't see eye to eye, because that is one of the things that prevents groupthink. When you have people that have opinions that differ so much from one another, you have that very good look at the problem. But yeah, and I think a lot of Latinos tend to have that hesitation about, hey, am I qualified for this? Am I going to be able to take on this new job? And I think that your story provides them that testimony that, hey, you can do it. Go and try it out, even if it's hard.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. I think as a community, that is one of our biggest challenges. I don't know whether it's cultural, whether it's the way in which we're raised. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from, but I do think that there is a high degree of self-doubt, in our community. And a lot of us don't grow up, with the mentors that we need to early on, so I spend a lot of my time, talking to people that are just getting started in their career or thinking about their career, and just hammering this point, which is to say, look, you can actually do whatever it is that you want to do. Right, the discomfort that comes from thinking to yourself, holy cow, this just looks like something that I'm not qualified for, or I don't belong here, or that sort of, or those things. Everybody has those. You just have to learn how to walk through them. Right, you have to learn how to put one foot in front of the other and get it done. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of people, certainly younger people, are starting to learn. But the sooner you learn that in your life, the more fulfilling life you're going to have, regardless of what it is. And of course, the other part of that lesson is, failure. I've had parts of my career, right, where you know, where I was sort of like, okay, I can do this. Let's get this done. And, you know, when I went to go work at the Democratic National Committee, you know, one of my first roles was on the Finance Committee, and I had to raise money, you know, and I thought to myself, oh, I can do this. And it turns out that I wasn't quite great at it, right? And you know, it was exhausting, but you know, failing's also important because, you know, once you fail, you know, you realize you're sort of like, hey, it's okay. I failed, you know, like my ego took a shot, but, you know, but hey, you know, like I can get back up and keep moving, right? And during the time when you fail, it's miserable. Like there's no way around it, right? Like when you're just sitting there going like, I don't know what I've done, you know, like, you know, my career's over, or, I'm gonna have to go back to Tucson and wait tables. This is like you go through all these things because that's what we do is we panic, right, and think that we made a huge mistake. But then eventually you look back and you're like, oh, you know what? I actually had a good time and I learned a lot, you know, et cetera. And it turns out, you know, that you know, we're on August 14th, 2020, right? Like all those failures in the past are a part of everything that I've done.
Right, right. They make you, and if you learn from it, you know, it's a lesson, not so much of a failure, but you know, and it propels you to move forward. You know that if you get into that same situation, you know, you can get out of it and improve your standing. So one thing that I think is very interesting is your international work. You, like you said, you've worked with companies, top companies, and work with government entities. So in that kind of setting, what are some of the strategies that you have used so that you succeed in such a competitive environment?
Yeah, so you know, I think that, you know, once again, you'll see a pattern in everything in my career. Once again, when you know, when the opportunity arose for me to go to Mexico, you know, I knew I could do the job. I knew I could do what was being asked of me. There was no doubt in my mind on that. But the idea of moving my family, you know, to Mexico, you know, and take them away from, you know, what was a fairly tranquil and you know, and normal existence here was a little overwhelming. You know, it didn't go over well with my kids, first of all, right? The whole idea of having to leave their friends. My wife was excited about it, but we were all very nervous about it, right? Because, you know, you have friends, you have a professional network. So like the idea of moving to Mexico City was really nerve-wracking, you know, for the family. But we did it. And when we got there, I think that the first thing I realized about this, you know, about this move is that there was this whole network of people, right, that are expats that do international work, right? And you know, these are folks that go from country to country. You know, sometimes you don't know the language, sometimes you don't know the culture well, but you just have to go for it, right? Like you go for it, and you go and you sort of you try to figure out, you know, how to work in the particular environment, adjust to the cultural nuances as best as you can, you know, and just execute as much as you can, you know, as in the way that you've always executed, you know, your strategy, you know. But the one thing, you know, the one thing that is cool about international work is that you're learning a ton, right? Like, you know, because number one, like whatever, you know, enterprise you're in, you know, it's probably similar to what you were doing in the States, but just in terms of the kinds of people that are drawn, you know, to being an expat, and the types of communities, where you're just, you're meeting people from across the globe, who the one thing you all have in common is that you're expats. So you're learning cultural issues, you're learning how people do business in other countries, you're learning, how to adapt on a daily basis, and now again, back on, August 14th, 2020, if I could go back to 2014 when we made this decision, I would say to myself, like, do it, just move, just go, right? Because like, even looking back, like for my family, because family is a big part of when you're doing an international assignment, right? Because you're moving, the entire family. And even as we look back, and talk about it and think about it, like, everybody thinks it was the greatest move that we've ever made, and we're all very, very grateful for doing it.
Yeah. All right.
Hey, so, David, let me.
Yeah, go ahead. And you're fine. Take your time.
All settled.
All right. Getting photobomb.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so you're talking about your professional experience, internationally. Now, one thing that I want to talk to you, and I want to move a little bit less from the business part of your experience, but want to ask you, how do you keep your Hispanic heritage alive? And this is a Hispanic Heritage Month contemplation. What are the things that you do, or family practice, or anything that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so that's a that's a very interesting conversation, very interesting question, particularly given, the place in history that we are right now, right? Like, this is, in my lifetime, and certainly in my professional lifetime, I've never experienced the sort of navel gazing that is currently occurring around race, ethnicity, and the professional environment. I think for me, I never, I never really thought about this issue until about probably like, 12 or 14 years ago. And I'll never forget the first time that it actually just like dawned on me, right? That the racial, or identity issue. And that was when I was actually in a meeting where I was with, the Senate Chiefs of Staff, right? And I remember looking around the room and I was like, holy cow, I am the only person of color in this room, right? And I'm sure that's happened to me many times, like it happens to all of us, right? But I remember walking out of there, and then, I worked for a Latino, senator, right? And and the whole experience, the whole experience of both working for a Latino, senator who was, one, there was two, there was Mel Martinez was the other one, but nonetheless, very, everybody else was white, right? So like, there was no diversity in the Senate as senators, and no diversity in the chief of staff. So, it dawned on me that, that I had a responsibility, number one, to address the issue. And then number two, that it was going to be something that I would carry with me for my entire career, as a, not just in terms of me personally, but it's just something where, like, I was going to have to advocate, and I was going to have to always figure out, how to get more Latinos involved in whatever I was doing, simply because I was a little shocked at the experience that I had in the Senate. So, as I moved forward after that, it was, number one, I feel like I became a lot more Hispanic to
Okay.
myself, right? Like all of a sudden I was sort of like, okay, like it is who I am, right? I've always known this, but I've never really like carried it like, front and center in my professional career. Not that I was like that it was behind me or anything. It was just, I was just being Ivan, right? And then all of a sudden, sort of like now, Ivan the Latino, whatever, right? Chief of staff, lobbyist, whatever it is. And that's going to be very important to my identity moving forward.
Yeah.
And and as a result, from time to time, I sit back and I take measure as to whether, like we all do, how's that going for you professionally, right? Like I've been the Latino lawyer, I've been the Latino, person, at Walmart or whatever it is. How's it going for you? And it's a dual-edged sword, right? I mean, I think part of it is helpful to me professionally, but part of it is also not, right? Because I choose to take on, not just me as a Latino, and you're in me, like how the way in which this manifests itself is small, but to us, as Latino professionals, like it feels huge, right? Like the amount of times that we've all been in meetings or in situations where somebody says something that, that is just not, is just not kosher, right? For me as a Latino, and when you choose to say, not for nothing,
Yeah.
but could you not refer to it this way, right? And you have to figure out professionally, how to do it more delicately. And I've gotten a lot better over time, right? Like before I'd just be like, just, confront the situation, and now I'm, now I try to say like, well, I'm not trying to judge anybody here, but would you consider not using that terminology because, X, Y, and Z, and I'll just leave it with you. Sometimes you're more aggressive, sometimes you're not, but nonetheless, it's a choice that you have to make, right? Like you're either gonna bring it up or you're not. And over time, those decisions in the professional environment sort of direct you, right? Like they sort of have a, like it's a, self-propelled, career director. I don't know if it's good or it's bad, but it is different. It's a different environment. Number one. Number two, for me, as a Latino, like I seek out other Latinos, right? Like, so that's just the thing, right? And, like try to make sure that, that when you're having relationships with folks, right, that you're helping them, grow, that you're there for you, they're there for they're there for you as well when they need to. And it's sometimes I think people overthink it, because we all have a network in our jobs, right? Like, so you walk in there and there's just the people you go to lunch to, the people that you become personal friends with, and sometimes it's because of a certain school, sometimes it's just random. But I think like for a Latino, and certainly for me, after that sort of aha moment, like for me, it's been intentional, right? Like my group in this company or my group, at the law firm are going to be the Latinos,
Yeah.
right? Like, and so again, that, that has a consequence, in the way in which you're viewed, and I don't know if it's good or it's bad. I guess, you know, you, I'm going to be working for a lot longer. So I'll tell you in like 20 years at the end of the day, but it is definitely an intentional choice.
Right. Yeah. So that's something that you're gonna keep your eye on and see, you know, if it does affect the things that you're working working on and the people that you're working with. Um, and I think that's very important. People have to feel like they need to voice things things out. Like you say, somebody's using something that is not kosher. Definitely speak up. So, um, so let me move to my last question, and let us know what's next in the horizon. Do you have a new project that you're working on, or do you have a new passion that you know want to share with our audience?
I continue, I continue to focus, I continue to focus my energy, um, outside of the things that I have to do for my job, but I continue to focus on diversity. I mean, on diversity and diversifying everything, and and to, in particular in this environment, to be practical and to be helpful as people are trying to figure all this out. So for me, like grabbing every space where I have influence, whether it's on a board that I sit, or whether it's in a job, in my job as we're hiring folks, like figuring out, how to, number one, diversify everything, and number two, or bring in more diversity. But number two, you know, I think it's time, I think it's time for Latinos and others just to be non-apologetic about saying, like, you need diversity, you need Latinos, you need, African Americans, you need more women, like the world has changed.
Yeah.
Right. And it's always been a value proposition that's been hidden somewhere. Right. So it's some like study, and, that says that, oh, if you have a more diverse staff, you're able to make more profits, whatever that study is. It's always been sort of to the side. And I just think that for me personally, now it's like front and center, right? Sort of like, this is the time for people to be like, no, no. You need more diversity because it just makes sense, and you'll ultimately work out better. So that's my focus.
Yeah. Okay. Well, once again, Ivan, I want to thank you so much for joining us and for spending the time with us at the the Latino Business Speaker Bureau. And once again, just thanking you for your time and for this interview.
Thanks, David.
Bye.